Friday afternoon, you check the clock. 3 more hours. Your inbox just exploded with 17 new emails. Your manager drops by your desk with that look. You know the one. That we need to talk about something urgent look. And suddenly, the weekend you have been fantasizing about since Monday morning feels like it is slipping through your fingers like sand. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. That familiar wave of frustration starts building. This is the Friday spiral. And here is what nobody tells you. The ancient Stoics 2,000 years ago figured out exactly how to stop this collapse before it even starts. Not with time management hacks, not with productivity apps, but with a mental framework so powerful that a Roman emperor used it to run an empire while literally fighting wars on multiple fronts. And today, you are going to learn the exact 7 steps he used. Steps that will make you completely untouchable by the Friday chaos that derails everyone else. Let me paint you a picture you will recognize immediately. It is 4:30 on Friday. You have been good all week. You have stayed focused. You have hit your deadlines. You can almost taste the freedom. Then it happens. Stephanie from accounting needs those reports you thought were due Monday. Your biggest client emails with a problem that absolutely cannot wait until Monday morning. Your phone buzzes. It is your boss. Can you jump on a quick call? Nothing is ever quick. And just like that, the peaceful Friday evening you promised yourself transforms into a pressure cooker of resentment and stress. You feel it in your body, that hot sensation rising from your stomach. Your thoughts start racing. Why does this always happen to me? Why can people not respect boundaries? Why does every single Friday have to end like this? And here is the brutal truth. You are not alone in this. A recent study showed that stress levels spike exactly 37% higher on Friday afternoons compared to any other day of the week. Think about that. The day that is supposed to signal relief and rest is actually when we feel most overwhelmed. You have probably noticed this pattern in yourself. Monday, you are fresh. Tuesday and Wednesday, you are in the flow. Thursday, you are pushing through. But Friday is when everything that got delayed, postponed, or ignored throughout the week comes crashing down on your desk all at once. And the worst part? It is not just the work. It is the emotional weight. It is the feeling that your time is not your own, that you are not in control, that no matter how hard you work or how well you plan, someone else always has the power to derail your peace. This feeling has a name. Psychologists call it learned helplessness. And it is destroying your Fridays. But before we go deeper into how the Stoics solved this exact problem, I need you to do something. If you are someone who is tired of letting Friday chaos control your emotional state, if you want to learn how ancient wisdom applies to modern pressure, hit that subscribe button right now. Because every single week on this channel, we break down Stoic principles that most people completely misunderstand and show you exactly how to use them in real-life situations like this Friday spiral. We are building a community of people who refuse to be controlled by external circumstances. People who are learning to master their internal world, regardless of what is happening around them. And trust me, what is coming in the next few minutes will give you a framework you will use every single Friday for the rest of your life. So subscribe now, because you are not going to want to miss what is coming next. Now here is where it gets interesting. Your first instinct when the Friday spiral hits is to react. To fire off that frustrated email, to complain to your coworker, to mentally rehearse all the things you wish you could say. And every single time you do that, you make everything worse, not better, worse. Because here is what the Stoics understood that we have completely forgotten. The event itself, that last-minute request, that boundary violation, that unexpected crisis, is not what is disturbing you. Your judgment about the event is what is disturbing you. Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who went from slave to teacher of Roman elites, put it this way: people are not disturbed by things, but by the views they take of them. Read that again. Not by things, by the views they take of them. This is not positive thinking nonsense. This is not pretending everything is fine when it is not. This is something far more powerful. It is the recognition that between what happens to you and how you feel about it, there is a gap. A space. And in that space lives your power. Most people never even notice this gap exists. Something happens, they react, they feel terrible, and they assume that is just how it works. But the Stoics trained themselves to pause in that gap, to examine their own thinking before it hijacked their entire emotional state. And this is exactly what we are about to do with your Friday spiral. But first, you need to understand why your current approach is actually feeding the problem. Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome, not a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower, not someone with an easy life writing pretty thoughts in a journal. He was running the largest empire in the world while dealing with wars, plagues, betrayals, and constant political pressure. And yet, in his personal writings, which we now call meditations, he wrote this: "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Stop and think about what he is saying. Marcus Aurelius, dealing with actual life and death decisions, barbarian invasions, and the weight of millions of lives on his shoulders, is telling you that you have the power to revoke your suffering at any moment. Not by changing your circumstances, by changing your estimate of them. He used this exact principle when generals brought him bad news from the front lines, when senators plotted against him, when his own family betrayed him. If he could apply this while the entire Roman Empire was collapsing around him, you can apply it when Stephanie needs those reports on a Friday afternoon. The question is how. And that is exactly what these 7 steps are going to show you. Imagine 2 versions of you. Same Friday, same inbox explosion, same last-minute request from your boss. Version 1, the old you, feels that immediate surge of anger, the unfairness of it all, the violation of your boundaries. Your heart rate spikes. Your thoughts spiral into resentment. You spend the next hour doing the work, but you are doing it in a state of internal chaos. Your energy is divided between the task and your emotional reaction to the task. By the time you finish, you are exhausted, not just from the work, but from the battle you have been fighting inside your own head. You carry that tension home. It ruins your Friday night. It bleeds into your Saturday morning. One request at 4:30 on a Friday has now stolen your entire weekend. Now imagine version 2. Same Friday, same request. But this version of you, the Stoic you, notices the initial reaction starting to form and does something different. You pause. You recognize the thought. This should not be happening right now. You see it for what it is. Just a thought, just a judgment, not a fact, not reality, just your interpretation. And in that pause, you make a choice. You choose a different estimate. This is just information. Someone needs something. I have the skills to handle it. I can choose how I respond. This version of you completes the same task in the same amount of time, but you do it from a place of internal calm. Your energy is focused entirely on the work, not split between work and resistance. When you finish, you are tired from the effort, but not depleted from the emotional drama. You leave work and transition into your weekend smoothly. One request at 4:30 on a Friday became just that. One request, not an emotional hijacking. The external circumstance was identical, but the internal experience was completely different. This is not theory. This is the transformation that is available to you. And it starts with step 1. Here is what most people miss about Stoicism. They think not reacting means not caring. They think internal calm means becoming passive or letting people walk all over you. This could not be further from the truth. The Stoics were not passive. Marcus Aurelius led armies. Epictetus stood up to tyrants despite being a former slave. Seneca was one of the most powerful political advisors in Rome. These were not men who let the world happen to them. They were men who acted powerfully from a place of inner stability rather than emotional reactivity, and that is the key distinction. Reaction is when external events control your internal state, and your internal chaos then controls your actions. Response is when you maintain your internal state, regardless of external events, and your inner clarity then directs powerful action. When you react to the Friday spiral, you are giving your power away. You are letting a Friday afternoon email determine your emotional state for the next 12 hours. When you respond, You keep your power. You acknowledge what is happening, you decide what it means, and you choose your action from a place of clarity. The Stoics had a specific term for this. They called it maintaining your inner citadel. The idea that no matter what is happening in the external world, your inner world remains unshakable. Not because nothing bothers you, but because you have trained yourself to separate events from your judgments about events. This is the foundation. And now we are going to build the 7 steps on top of it. You have probably seen successful people who seem completely unfazed by pressure. The executive who stays calm in crisis meetings while everyone else is panicking. The entrepreneur who receives devastating news and immediately shifts into problem-solving mode. The colleague who handles unreasonable demands without losing their composure. What you are witnessing is not a personality trait they were born with. It is a practiced skill. Many of them, whether they call it Stoicism or not, have learned to create distance between stimulus and response. Ryan Holiday, author and modern Stoic practitioner, has talked about using these principles while running a marketing company and dealing with client emergencies at all hours. Tim Ferriss has discussed how Stoic practices helped him manage the stress of building multiple businesses. These are not ancient philosophers in togas. These are modern professionals in the exact same high-pressure environments you are in. And they are all using variations of what you are about to learn. The Friday spiral is not unique to you, but your response to it can be. And that response is what separates people who are perpetually stressed from people who remain centered regardless of what is happening around them. Now let me show you exactly how to become that second person. Step 1 is called the pause and label. When that Friday afternoon request hits and you feel that initial surge of frustration or panic, you are going to do something radical. You are going to pause for exactly 5 seconds and label what is happening, out loud if you are alone, or silently if you are in public. Here is what that sounds like. I am noticing frustration, or I am noticing resistance to this request, or I am noticing the thought that this is unfair. The key word is noticing. By using this language, you are creating separation between you and the emotion. You are not saying, I am frustrated, which fuses your identity with the emotion. You are saying, I am noticing frustration, which makes you the observer of the emotion rather than the emotion itself. The Stoics called this objective representation. Marcus Aurelius practiced it constantly. When something upset him, he would describe it in the most plain, objective terms possible. This is a report that needs completing. This is a person requesting my time. This is information that requires a decision. By stripping away the emotional story and reducing the situation to its factual components, he prevented his mind from catastrophizing. And catastrophizing is exactly what happens in the Friday spiral. Someone asks you to stay late and your mind immediately jumps to this always happens. Nobody respects my time. I am never going to have a life. This job is destroying me. That is catastrophizing. That is your mind taking one event and spinning it into a narrative of victimhood and helplessness. The pause and label interrupts that process before it gains momentum. 5 seconds. That is all it takes. But those 5 seconds are the difference between being controlled by your reactions and maintaining your center. Practice this first step religiously and everything else becomes easier. But here is what nobody tells you about this step. The real power is not in stopping the emotion. The emotion is going to come. That is human. The power is in not letting that emotion dictate your next action. Step 2 is, ask the dichotomy question. This is directly from Epictetus, and it is devastatingly simple. When that Friday request lands on your desk, you ask yourself one question. Is this within my control or outside my control? That is it. But the clarity this question provides is extraordinary. Let me break it down. You cannot control that the request came in at 4:30 on Friday. Outside your control. You cannot control that your manager has poor planning skills. Outside your control. You cannot control that clients have emergencies. Outside your control. Here is what you can control. Whether you say yes or negotiate a different timeline, within your control. How you emotionally frame the situation, within your control. The quality of work you produce in response, within your control. Whether you let this ruin your evening, within your control. Most of your Friday spiral stress is coming from trying to control things that are outside your control. You are mentally arguing with reality. You are wishing things were different. You are resenting that this is happening. All of that is wasted energy. It is like being angry at rain for being wet. The Stoics were obsessed with this distinction because they understood something profound. When you focus your energy only on what you can control, you become infinitely more powerful. When you waste energy on what you cannot control, you become helpless and bitter. So right after you pause and label in step 1, you immediately move to step 2. You ask the dichotomy question. And then, this is critical, you consciously redirect all of your mental energy only to what is within your control. This is not acceptance in the sense of liking what is happening. This is acceptance in the sense of acknowledging reality, so you can work with it instead of against it. You are about to see how this connects to step 3. But first, understand this. Every minute you spend wishing the request had not come in is a minute you are not spending on actually handling it. The request exists. That is reality. The only question now is how you are going to respond to that reality, and that is entirely within your control. Step 3 is reframe with purpose. Now that you have paused, labeled the emotion, and identified what is within your control, you are going to do something that sounds simple, but is transformative. You are going to consciously reframe the situation through a lens of purpose rather than victimhood. Here is how this works. Instead of "this is ruining my Friday," you say "this is an opportunity to practice staying calm under pressure." Instead of "why does this always happen to me," you say "this is a chance to demonstrate reliability." Instead of "this is unfair," you say "this is within my capability to handle." Notice what is happening here. You are not lying to yourself. You are not pretending you love the situation. You are simply choosing a more empowering interpretation of the exact same facts. Seneca, another Stoic philosopher, was famous for this. He was exiled twice, lost his fortune multiple times, and was eventually forced to commit suicide by the Emperor Nero. Yet in his writings, he consistently reframed adversity as training. He called difficulties the gymnasium of the soul. Every challenge was a chance to practice virtue. Every obstacle was a chance to strengthen character. Now, I'm not saying your Friday afternoon email is equivalent to exile or execution, but the principle is the same. You can interpret the same event in multiple ways, and the interpretation you choose determines your emotional experience. When you reframe the Friday request as an opportunity rather than an imposition, something shifts in your nervous system. Your body literally responds differently. Stress hormones decrease. Creative problem-solving increases. You move from a defensive, contracted state to an open, capable state. And here is the beautiful part. This is not something you have to believe deep in your soul for it to work. You just have to practice it. The more you consciously reframe situations, the more automatic it becomes. Eventually, your default interpretation of Friday requests shifts from negative to neutral or even positive. But this only works if you are honest about what is coming next. Because reframing alone is not enough if you do not follow through with step 4. Step 4 is decide your boundary. This is where Stoicism gets practical, and most people get it wrong. They think being Stoic means accepting everything and never pushing back. Absolutely false. The Stoics were fierce about protecting what mattered, but they did it from clarity, not emotion. After you have paused, identified what is in your control, and reframed the situation, you now make a clear decision about your boundary. Can you complete this request and still honor your needs? If yes, you commit fully without resentment. If no, you communicate a clear boundary or negotiate a compromise. Here is what this looks like in practice. Your boss asks you to finish something before you leave. You pause. You label. I am noticing resistance. You ask the dichotomy. I cannot control that they asked. I can control my response. You reframe. This is a chance to demonstrate capability. Now you decide. If completing this request means staying an extra hour, but you have no critical plans, you might decide the boundary is acceptable. You say yes, and you do the work without internal resistance. No resentment, no victim story. You chose this. If completing the request means missing your child's recital or violating a commitment you made to yourself about work-life balance, you might decide the boundary is not acceptable. You calmly communicate. I can have this ready first thing Monday morning. Or if this is truly urgent, I need to understand the priority so I can adjust other deliverables accordingly. Notice the difference. You are not emotionally reacting. You are not complaining. You are not being passive-aggressive. You are clearly stating reality and offering solutions. The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, understanding what is real and what is possible, and acting accordingly. Most people do the opposite. They say yes while feeling no. They agree while resenting. They comply while internally rebelling. This is the worst of both worlds. You do the thing and you feel terrible about it. Deciding your boundary cleanly means you are either fully in or you are clearly out. No middle ground of bitter compliance. And here is something crucial about boundaries that connects to step 5. A boundary is not a weapon to punish others. It is not about making other people wrong. It is about protecting your capacity to function with integrity. When you set a boundary from that place, it is firm but not hostile. It is clear but not defensive. It is powerful. Step 5 is execute with full presence. You have paused. You have identified what is in your control. You have reframed the situation. You have decided your boundary. Now comes the part where most people sabotage themselves. They agree to do the thing, but they do it while mentally complaining the entire time. They are physically present but mentally at war. This is exhausting and it destroys the quality of your work. Step 5 is about total commitment to whatever you decided in step 4. If you said yes, you are now all in, not half in while the other half of you is resentful. All in. The Stoics called this voluntary action. When you do something, even something you did not initially want to do, you do it as if you chose it. Because in the moment of deciding, you did choose it. You chose to say yes. So now you execute that choice fully. Marcus Aurelius had a practice for this. Whenever he had to do something unpleasant but necessary, he would remind himself that he was doing it in service of something larger. Justice, the welfare of Rome, the example he was setting for future generations. You can do the same thing on a smaller scale. When you are completing that Friday request, remind yourself what you are serving. Maybe it is your reputation for reliability. Maybe it is the success of a project you care about. Maybe it is simply honoring the decision you made in step 4. This is not about being a doormat. Remember, in step 4 you had the option to set a boundary. If you are at step 5, it means you consciously chose to do this work. So do it with presence. Do it with focus. Do it without the internal commentary that drains you. There is a Zen concept that fits perfectly here. When you are washing dishes, wash dishes. Do not wash dishes while wishing you were somewhere else. Do not wash dishes while resenting that you have to wash dishes. Just wash the dishes. Applied to your Friday request, it becomes this. When you are completing the report, complete the report. Not complete the report while running a parallel narrative about how unfair this is. Just complete the report. The work takes the same amount of time either way, but one approach leaves you exhausted and bitter. The other leaves you tired but intact. You preserved your inner citadel. And that brings us to something critical about what happens after you finish. Step 6 is release without residue. You finish the Friday request. The work is done. You are walking out of the office or closing your laptop. And here is where the Friday spiral often continues, even though the triggering event is over. You replay the situation. You rehearse what you should have said. You text your friend to complain. You tell your partner the story with extra dramatic flair to justify your frustration. You keep the emotional charge alive for hours or even days after the actual event ended. The Stoics had a specific teaching about this. Do not carry the weight of the past into the present moment. Each moment is fresh. Each moment is an opportunity to be free. Seneca wrote about this extensively. He said most of our suffering comes not from present circumstances, but from our refusal to let go of past circumstances. You are no longer at work. The request is complete. But you are still suffering because you are mentally replaying and rehashing. Step 6 is about consciously releasing the event once it is done. And here is a specific technique the Stoics used. Negative visualization in reverse. Instead of imagining how much worse things could have been, which is traditional negative visualization, you acknowledge that the event is now in the past and therefore has zero power over your present moment. unless you give it that power. Here is what this sounds like internally. That happened. It is done. I handled it. It is now in the past. I am now in a new moment. What do I want to experience right now? This is not suppression. Suppression is pushing down an emotion that is still active. Release is acknowledging an emotion that has served its purpose and is no longer needed. Think of it like this. The emotion of frustration when the request first came in was information. It told you something about your values and boundaries. That was useful. But once you have acted on that information, continuing to feel the emotion is like continuing to hear a fire alarm after you have already left the burning building. The alarm served its purpose. You are safe now. You can turn it off. Releasing without residue means you complete the full cycle. Event happens. You feel, you respond, you act, you release, you return to neutral. Most people get stuck in an endless loop where they never return to neutral. They carry the residue of every Friday request into their weekend, and the residue of every difficult week into the next week. This is how people end up burned out. Not from the actual work, from the refusal to release the emotional residue of the work. And here is what makes this step even more powerful when combined with Step 7. Step 7 is evening reflection. This is the capstone practice that turns everything you just did into lasting change. The Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, practiced daily reflection. Every evening they would review the day, not to judge themselves harshly, but to learn, to extract wisdom, to become better. You are going to do the same thing with your Friday spiral experience. That evening, or the next morning, you take 5 minutes and you ask yourself 3 questions. First question: what happened today that triggered me and how did I respond? You replay the Friday request. You notice where you handled it well and where you could have done better. No shame, just observation. Second question: which of the 7 steps did I execute effectively and which ones need more practice? Maybe you nailed the pause and label, but you struggled with releasing without residue. That is useful information. You now know where to focus your practice. Third question: what did this experience teach me about myself, my values, and what matters most? Maybe you realized that your Friday frustration is actually about feeling like your time is not valued. Or maybe you realized you have been saying yes to things you should decline. Or maybe you discovered you are more capable of handling pressure than you thought. This reflection is not optional. This is how the 7 steps move from a framework you applied once to a mental habit that changes your entire relationship with stress. Marcus Aurelius did not become a Stoic sage by reading philosophy once. He became one through relentless daily practice and reflection. Every single night, he would write in his journal. He would remind himself of Stoic principles. He would examine his own behavior honestly. The Meditations, the book that survived 2,000 years and is still changing lives today, was his private journal. It was never meant to be published. It was his tool for self-improvement. You are going to create your own version, not a book. Just 5 minutes of intentional reflection. And here is why this matters so much. Without reflection, the Friday spiral will happen again next week and you will react the same way. With reflection, you are building a new pattern. You are training your mind to automatically move through these 7 steps. Eventually, this becomes your default response to pressure. The pause and label happens in 1 second instead of 5. The dichotomy question becomes instinctive. The reframe happens before the old story even forms. But this level of mastery only comes through repetition and reflection. So commit to this 7th step. Make it non-negotiable. Every time you face a Friday spiral or any stressful situation, you review it that evening or the next morning. You extract the lesson. You celebrate what worked. You identify what needs refinement. This is how you become untouchable. Now let me tell you what this all adds up to. When you master these 7 steps, you do not eliminate stress from your life. That is not the goal, and it is not possible. What you eliminate is unnecessary suffering. You eliminate the extra layer of misery that comes from fighting reality. You eliminate the emotional spiral that turns a 1-hour request into a weekend-ruining catastrophe. You become someone who can handle pressure without it breaking you, who can face unreasonable demands without losing your center, who can navigate chaos while maintaining inner peace. This is not about becoming emotionless or robotic. The Stoics felt deeply. Marcus Aurelius grieved his children. Seneca mourned his brother. Epictetus felt the injustice of slavery. But they did not let those feelings control them. They felt what they felt, and then they chose how to respond. You are going to do the same. The next time Friday afternoon brings you chaos, you are going to feel the initial frustration or panic. That is human. But then you are going to pause. You are going to label it. You are going to ask what is in your control. You are going to reframe with purpose. You are going to decide your boundary clearly. You are going to execute with full presence. You are going to release without residue. And you are going to reflect on the experience. 7 steps. It sounds like a lot right now, but after you do it a few times, it becomes fluid. It becomes natural. It becomes who you are. And when that happens, you will look back at your old Friday spirals and barely recognize that version of yourself. The version who let a 4:30 email destroy an entire weekend. The version who gave their power away to external circumstances. That version no longer exists. You have become something different, someone who cannot be shaken, someone who maintains their inner citadel regardless of what the world throws at them, someone who lives according to Stoic principles not because it sounds wise but because it works. This is your path forward. These 7 steps are your map, and the beautiful thing is you do not have to be perfect at them. You just have to practice them. Every Friday, every difficult moment, every time you feel yourself starting to spiral, you come back to these steps, and slowly, gradually, inevitably, you transform. There is something deeply powerful about realizing that your worst Fridays, the ones that feel like they are destroying you, are actually building you. Every time you choose the Stoic response over the reactive spiral, you are strengthening a mental muscle. You are proving to yourself that you are not a victim of circumstances. You are not helpless. You are not at the mercy of other people's poor planning or unreasonable demands. You are free. Not free from challenges. Free within challenges. And that freedom is the ultimate goal of Stoicism. Not to escape life, to be fully alive within it without being controlled by it. Marcus Aurelius knew this. He was the most powerful man in the world, and he could not escape difficulty, but he could choose how he met it. You are in the same position, just on a different scale. You cannot escape Friday afternoon requests. You cannot eliminate stress from modern work life, but you can choose how you meet it. And that choice is where your power lives. That choice is what determines whether you spend your weekends recovering from Friday or enjoying them. That choice is what determines whether you look back on your career and see decades of resentment or decades of growth. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose like a Stoic. Because the alternative is to stay trapped in the Friday spiral forever, wondering why everyone else seems to handle pressure better than you. They do not have an easier life. They have better tools. And now you have those tools too. Use them, practice them, master them. Your future self, the one who stays calm when everyone around you is losing their minds, is depending on the choices you make starting this Friday. Do not let that version of you down. If this video gave you a framework you can actually use, hit that like button right now. If you want more Stoic wisdom applied to real modern problems every single week, subscribe to this channel. And here is what I want you to do to lock this in. Go to the comments right now and tell me which of the 7 steps resonated with you most. Was it the pause and label? The dichotomy question? Releasing without residue? Drop a comment with your answer. Because when you publicly commit to something, even just in a comment, you are far more likely to actually implement it. That is the psychology of commitment. So comment which step you are going to focus on this Friday. Do it now, and I will see you in the next video, where we are going to talk about another Stoic principle that will change how you handle conflict forever. Until then, remember this: you are not controlled by what happens to you. You are controlled only by how you respond to what happens to you, and that response is always, always your choice.